Imagine waking up every day, knowing your life doesn't belong to you, but to the whim of a stranger. Every step, every breath, every thought could be controlled by someone who doesn't even know your name. You didn't choose this fate. It was imposed by the force of arms, by a court sentence, or by the simple accident of your birth. Roman slavery was an unending nightmare. Back-breaking labor under the scorching sun that drained every ounce of strength. Brutal punishments meted out without trial, and the terror of never knowing if you'd survive until sunset. There was no appeal, no mercy. You were reduced to a mere instrumentum vocal, an object that breathed. Your existence boiled down to serving, voiceless, rightless, and hopeless. Today, you'll discover how this machine of oppression worked, how slaves were recruited, the cruel fates that awaited them, and how some dared to dream of freedom. We'll see desperate escapes, silent solidarity in the barracks, and revolts led by men who refused to remain chained. Those sparks of hope almost brought down the greatest empire of antiquity. But before we dive into these stories and curiosities of the Roman Empire, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell icon. That way, you won't miss any secrets of ancient Rome. Get ready. The first link to break will be the one binding you to daily routine. Soon, you'll feel the real weight of waking up as someone else's property. From victim to commodity, how one became a slave in Rome. After a battlefield victory, hundreds of thousands of prisoners were shackled and herded onto ships bound for Rome's slave markets. Julius Caesar, in his Gallic campaign, brought back about 500,000 Gauls at once. Men, women, and children ripped from their villages, entire families torn apart by force. These captives were displayed in public fairs as merchandise. Strong adults fetched high prices, while children and the elderly sold for mere coins. In the Mediterranean, piracy fueled this macabre trade. Pirates didn't just hunt treasure. They seized sailors and merchants, sailed to Italian ports, and offered their victims at slave stalls alongside fine pottery and textiles. At any moment, a trader could become a prisoner, then an instrumentum vocal, an object that spoke. Back in the Forum, Roman justice was relentless. Citizens convicted of theft, unpaid debts, or rebellion faced a cruel choice: quick death or eternal servitude. Many chose slavery to escape crucifixion or stoning, and to make matters worse, birth sealed one's fate. Children born to enslaved mothers arrived in chains, rights stripped at the womb. There was also debt bondage. Desperate families sold themselves for food and shelter. This legal ploy trapped generations in servitude as their descendants remained bound to repay debts that never ceased to grow, forever barred from free society. In this crucible of violence and law, men and women ceased to be people and became commodities, providing the labor that built temples, roads, and aqueducts. And you'll see how many ended up in this fate, not all by choice. The agony of waking up as property. Waking without free will was routine. The common Roman slave opened his eyes in a damp, doorless cubicle, feeling the weight of his chain as a daily promise of suffering. Every muscle ached before work even began. The slightest creak in the air sent his heart racing. What if, at that moment, the Roman master decided to test a new punishment? At any sound, the overseer could appear, ready to enforce authority with whip and shouts. In the villas, the stench of urine and sour flour mingled with fear. The Greek scholar slave, despite his learning, escaped no fate. The lavish study where he taught became his prison. Each scroll he touched reminded him his mind was valuable, but his freedom was not. He taught Latin and philosophy to the master's children, knowing that a single slip could send him back to scrubbing latrines as punishment. Meanwhile, the food taster sampled the patron's porridge, swallowing fear with every spoonful, a taste of possible death in each mouthful. His anxious gaze roamed the hall for any sign of displeasure on his master's face, because one flicker of disdain could mean poison or lash. Hands trembling, he lifted the bowl, the heavy aroma of rotten onions blending with the dread of a sudden end. Suddenly, the Roman master burst in, irritated. "Where is my rose perfume?" The domestic slave bolted through corridors, heart in, throat stumbling in his own sandals. Every step echoed the reminder that in this house you didn't live for yourself but to serve, and every mistake could cost your life. And you'll see how, after capture, these people were thrown into a cruel lottery of roles, some nearly lethal. The Wheel of Fate, Roles and Destinies. In Rome, no lottery was more merciless than the slave division. An invisible draw decreed your destiny: domestic, agricultural, or mining. The domestic slave, the lucky one, cooked, cleaned, and even helped teach the master's children. He lived under a solid roof, but watched every move. One wrong word or dish could trigger punishment. His day began before dawn, spurred by the clink of the overseer's keys, and ended only when the last ember died in the hearth under cover of night. Agricultural slaves faced a far worse fate. Treated like livestock, shackled in vast wheat and barley fields, fed scraps of bread and thin gruel, they worked until their bodies gave out. Each swing of the hoe reminded them they were numbers, not names. At dusk, they were herded into dank, fetid barracks where dreams of escape were smothered by sobs and the glare of guard torches, ready to crush any whisper of flight. Mining slaves received a slow death sentence. They descended into claustrophobic tunnels, breathing toxic dust and dodging sudden blasts. The miner slave watched daylight recede into memory. Each pickaxe strike drove him closer to the grave, and few survived past 40. Then there was the gladiator, a tragic celebrity. An ex-slave or prisoner of war, he fought for fame and a glimmer of freedom. But each bloody victory risked costing him more than privileges. He might lose his life. Spartacus knew well this duality, cheered by the crowd, yet disposable under the game master's merciless eyes. Can you imagine what went through the mind of someone tasting the master's food? Strange and absurd tasks. The food taster swallowed fear with every bite, his palate worth its weight in gold, yet it could cost his life. Before each banquet, he sampled soups and sauces, alert for any metallic or bitter trace. If he survived, he signaled edible. If not, he saved the master's household from poisoning. Living among silver bowls, his mind always hovered over the hidden blade beneath the table, poised to deliver a verdict of life or death. The nomenclator was the patron's living memory, whispering names of guests, allies, and rivals at endless feasts. Every handshake, every political alliance depended on him. Ridiculous yet vital, a slave burdened with remembering who mattered in a room, thick with intrigue and power. Some Greek scholars, despite their learning, became slave registrars, noting imperfections as if they catalogued old furniture. Others subcontracted launched side hustles, copying philosophical treatises or speeches for nobles, stashing coins in parchment rolls. They dreamed of buying their freedom with words. Even the pustor, the ceremonial taster, used dark humor as armor against daily terror. He'd mutter, "If every job killed, we'd all be dead by now," hoping for a smile from shackled companions. These bizarre roles reveal Roman slavery's complexity, not just brute force, but intellectual exploitation. Every function created a microcosm of power and humiliation, where even the subtlest service could be as perilous as hauling stone in the mines. But nothing compares to the brutality of pre-dawn hours on farms and in mines. Pre-dawn punishments and deprivation. Before sunrise, the overseer's shout was alarm and terror. The domestic slave swept cold ashes from the hearth, arranged pillows, each creak risking a whipping. Silence was safety. Outside, the agricultural. Slave rose in shackles, iron biting into wrists with every step. The morning chill cut like a blade, but nothing stung more than the lash that would punish any lag. Breakfast, when it came, meant stale bread and watery porridge. A grim reminder. That meal meant mere survival. As dawn fully broke, the crack of whips melded with the clatter of tools. The Greek scholar slave, inside his villa's clean study, sweated over translations. 1 second's delay, and the overseer would strike. He longed for philosophical discourse, but got reality's brutal lessons instead. At night, all crammed into stinking barracks, the odor of urine and rotting straw clinging to clothes and lungs. Dreams of escape died under chains and torchlight. Guards ensured no one slipped away alive. Have you ever wondered how an event like this shaped the destiny of an empire? Hit like now and help us keep bringing stories like this. But surviving. This routine required more than physical strength. There remained a secret hope of one day being free. Love and loss, forbidden relationships. In Rome, marriage between slaves was forbidden. Unions had no legal value. Even so, bonds emerged silently. A knowing glance when sharing crumbs in the courtyard, hands that met furtively behind pillars. The common Roman slave and his companion would sketch escape plans with quick glances, aware that the slightest sound, like the hammering of a horseshoe, could give them away and separate them forever. When a spouse or child was sold, there was no dignified goodbye. The slave farmer would watch his son being pushed into a cart, his small arm extended in a final wave. The scene burned in the memory of those who remained, transforming love into a live ember of revolt. Each silent tear became a promise of intimate resistance. The patrician could, at any moment, take companions to the auction as merchandise. A stolen embrace before dawn was an act of courage and defiance. Some slaves exchanged whispered vows, aware that the price of a heart was measured in coins, but willing to pay with everything they had, their own safety. These clandestine loves were more than romance. They were small revolutions of humanity. In dark barracks, promises were made. If we find ourselves free one day, we will never be apart again. It was silent hope that nourished the soul exhausted by work and oppression, and when the law conspired against dignity, the only thing left was to challenge the system. The law that turned people into objects. In Rome, the law defined the slave as an instrumentum vocal, an object that spoke but had no legal soul. Without rights or defense, the slave lived under the master's code. Extreme punishments, such as public floggings, crucifixions, and iron collars engraved with messages of humiliation, were perfectly legal. The Roman officer patrolled the squares, authorizing punishments with the impassivity of someone signing an edict, without ever considering the human pain behind the numbers. If a member of the household committed a serious crime, all the slaves in that household could be executed, a collective retaliation without any trial. A whisper of conspiracy was enough for the foreman to order the whip or the gallows. In theory, modest protections emerged. Sellers had to declare illnesses or defects before selling, and slaves could appeal in court. In practice, judges rarely heard these appeals, and the court functioned as an inaccessible wall. The Greek slave scholar spent hours writing petitions for mercy on parchment, only to see them recycled as drafts for the villa's accounts. His texts, filled with philosophical quotations, were ignored. The law existed, but it was an invisible barrier that protected no one. In this system, justice was a privilege of the free. For the slave, each law meant only new forms of oppression. Even so, in the midst of this legal hell, some embers of freedom resisted, ready to ignite the next spark of revolt. And even in this legal hell, some embers of freedom persisted. Illusion of freedom, Roman manumission. Some slaves secretly stashed small savings called peculium, coins hidden in tunic folds or metal utensils. This nest egg fueled dreams of liberty. Others performed heroic deeds. Rescuing the master's child from a fire could earn a Manumission decree. In such rare moments, the Caput Libertatis ceremony bestowed a white felt cap on the ex-slave, symbolizing rebirth and the status of libertus. But freedom carried unseen chains. The libertus owed annual service days to his former master. Still, and bound to the household, he could not hold political or military office. Attempts drew mocking laughter in the forum. The stigma of ex-slave trailed him down every street. Free citizens avoided business or marriage that might tarnish their status. Even the Greek scholar slave, once freed, felt this social brand. His works bore his name, yet academic peers whispered about his origins. Roman manumission liberated the body, but scarred the soul. A freedom weighed down by obligations, approvals, and daily rejections. This false liberty served as a showcase of hope to current slaves while reinforcing the system. Few attained the Caput Libertatis, and those who did remained at the mercy of the elite. Until one day, rebellion erupted from the whispers. Spartacus and the revolt that shook Rome. In 73 BC, in the sands of Capuus Ludus, the Thracian gladiator Spartacus led the escape of about 70 companions. Within weeks, his ranks swelled to over 100,000. A coalition of escaped slaves, war, captives, and outcasts. By torchlight in Campania, they lit the fires of rebellion, improvised spears, pitchforks from farms, and hand-painted banners proclaiming freedom or death. Their early skirmishes were spectacular victories. Unprepared Roman detachments fell before the rebels' fury, who fought not for glory, but survival. Each triumph fanned Spartacus's legend. The former gladiator forged discipline from desperation, inspiring thousands who once lived nameless. Makeshift camps celebrated spoils of bread and freedom songs. As news spread across the peninsula like wildfire, alarmed, the Senate dispatched legions under Crassus. The final clash near the Silarus River turned into a bloodbath. Spartacus fell in battle. His body vanished in the chaos, but his cause lived on. Some 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, a 120-mile stretch of crosses as a chilling warning. Spartacus's revolt became an enduring symbol of resistance against Roman slavery. Though crushed, the image of broken chains and burning torches continued to inspire those who yearned for dignity, and the punishment that followed became the ultimate display of Roman terror. The fall of the slave system. After Spartacus's defeat, Rome staged a spectacle of terror. Nearly 6,000 rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, stretching almost 200 miles under the scorching sun. Each hanged body warned that defying Roman power meant a slow, humiliating death. This corridor of horrors declared that slavery would not be undone by revolt. Yet the war captivity-based slave model collapsed as Rome's conquests waned. Without fresh captives, the empire had to adapt its labor force. Thus emerged the colony, workers, tied to the land by obligations, no longer legally owned. This marked the dawn of medieval serfdom, where exploitation persisted in new forms. The Greek scholar slave, now a libertus, watched these changes with mixed relief and bitterness. He could walk free, but saw former brethren still under rural scepters. The iron chains faded from wrists but echoed in collective memory as symbols of an unpaid human toll. As the empire evolved, its roads, aqueducts, and temples, built on the backs of millions, stood as monuments to Roman glory. Yet, the most lasting lesson isn't in the marble. It's in honoring the suffering that made it possible, recognizing that human cost is the greatest tribute we can pay to those who, nameless though they were, shaped history. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share this video with your friends. That way, you help us continue bringing quality historical content. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video about ancient Rome and its magnificent empire.